sitting at a desk all day following the rules just wasn't going to ever be something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I realized a lot of it had to do with interpersonal relationships and just trust and building connections and genuine relationships. I'm always looking for a challenge. It could be a little thing I'm doing around the house. It could be something I'm just walking down the street. It could be people really close to you that don't believe in you. But if you see people, strangers that do believe in you, that kind of gives you even more confidence. It's one of those things where, yeah, I also have to go in there and prove myself to vendors. Them trusting me is also a validation.
Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Aryeh Rephun. Aryeh, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's great whenever we get to have someone in studio. I understand you spent some time in Queens, hanging out in the New York area. So thank you really for coming to visit us, and for joining us today on this really hot summer day.
My pleasure. It's definitely the old stomping grounds, so it's good to be back.
Are there some of the restaurants, I guess, are probably still the same from when you were here, so it's fine.
Yeah, definitely. A couple that are always changing, but
100%.
Yeah.
We begin this podcast with one question, and that is, we ask our guests to tell us what happened in their upbringing, where their drive for hustle comes from. And your bio, everyone should read it. I begin every episode by saying that everyone should look at the bio. We don't do big intros, but everyone should learn about you. And in that, it's, where does that drive come from to go from a standard business, quote unquote, to then starting your own jewelry brand, which can't be easy, hustling through that? I think that you've been around now for 6 years.
Right.
So that means you're in it. That means you've done it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I imagine that those early years were not chill and light, and that there were some difficult moments that you had to hustle through. So take us to where that drive kind of comes from the beginning.
Yeah, definitely still not chill, but I was thinking about this. I would say in terms of childhood, just growing up in school, I was always kind of the kid that for instance, when my parents would meet with teachers, they would tell them that we like him a lot, but he's always misbehaving. He's always making jokes. Like, his behavior is terrible, and he doesn't really do so well on tests. But for some reason, we like him. So they always tried to work with my parents. And that kind of instilled in me this confidence in a way that I knew that I can kind of bend the rules a little bit and get away with it. But also, I knew that sitting at a desk all day following the rules just wasn't going to ever be something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So that kind of always was how I was.
So it's like and then when you're looking for that way out, quote unquote, not way out of a bad thing, it's just like, I will not sit and type on Excel spreadsheets all day. So then you get introduced to the jewelry business, and you're like, that's it. The energy, I find that different people's hustle, what I've learned from this whole experience is that different people's hustle is stimulated in different ways. Some people love that service aspect, the operations aspect. Their boss buys a new building, and now they get to analyze different roles and find profits or whatever. But some people just want to hustle the streets, for lack of a better term, or individual, kind of get that grind together. So
yeah, so for me, jewelry kind of just fell into my lap. I did gain a passion for it over time, just seeing natural stones and seeing the beauty of everything. But it really clicked more when I started learning the business and realizing this is something I could do on my own. This is not something I necessarily need someone to tell me what to do. I can just, if I have the right contacts, I have enough information to start, I can just do it on my own. And once I started doing that, that's when I really just was like, that's it. I'm never going to work for someone again. I'm just going to do me. And
there's a lot there to unpack. The first thing is, I think it's interesting that a lot of people would say, first they love the diamonds, then they fell into the business, then they like the business. On one of the other things that I always say on the podcast is everybody should define their own hustle. And it's amazing that you said, correct me if I'm wrong, you love the business and then you fell in love with the diamonds. I mean, everyone sees a beautiful stone and thinks that it's an amazing piece of jewelry and thinks it's beautiful. What I mean is like, it wasn't you were in working on diamonds and said, hey, I could sell these things. It was more like, what business do I like? What business can I see myself being successful in? And then you learned the diamond, the design, the manufacturing, the diamond side, not vice versa.
Well, they kind of happened hand in hand, but it was one of the businesses that I realized a lot of it had to do with interpersonal relationships and just trust and building connections and genuine relationships with manufacturers, diamond dealers. So that came naturally to me more so than if I were to work in another industry where there's definitely a barrier to entry, but once you're in, you feel kind of at home and comfortable. So once I had that feeling, I obviously have to, start really learning a lot more about the industry, learning about the diamonds themselves, the quality, how to tell quality and value, stuff like that. But yeah, I would say originally it started kind of just as this feeling where I felt comfortable enough that I can move around on my own, and then I had to gain the knowledge over time.
What is it? The jewelry? There are two things that you said about the jewelry industry that I think are true. We do a lot of business with jewelers. I'm going to get to the second one, which I think is more important in a second. But you said breaking in as the guy who has to be comfortable. That industry is like super tight. It's super. You earn your way, but it's hard to earn your way. You gotta, I imagine that when the new guy shows up and starts selling, your customer's got to be someone else's customer or potential prospect. So I imagine it's an industry that's, I don't want to say scary to break into, but somewhat scary to think about, like, hey, I'm going to challenge the big guys. Not that you have to be a big, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everyone who's hustling in the jewelry business, like, it's not like insurance or anything like that or financial services. It's like, I don't want to say cutthroat because I don't want it to sound gangster, but you know what I mean? Like being the new guy has got to be.
Right. So I think that's why it fit my personality the most, because I'm always looking for a challenge. It could be a little thing I'm doing around the house. It could be something I'm just walking down the street. I want to score a piece of garbage into the trash can. I'll do it 3 times until it goes in. So like I'm always looking for that challenge, and it's really the perfect place. Like you said, there's always a bigger jeweler. There's always someone who has more inventory, more client base. There are guys, if you walk down on 47th Street, that are trying to drag people in off the street into their store. So it's just one of those things where there's a constant competition. And that's really the main drive for me. It's just feeling like there's always someone to beat. There's always someone doing some new trend or selling some new type of item or finding another creative way, because they're all businessmen, to gain an edge and to create a bigger following. So it just feels like just an ocean, like a jungle. You just have an opportunity to eat and beat people out every day.
But
so that's
isn't that what Keep Hustling is about? It's about finding that. I just find it amazing that one of the things that I miss about being in Manhattan every day is that energy. And every once in a while, you stand on 47th Street. Yes, you're right. It wouldn't be my style to have someone standing in front of my store trying to pull someone off the street to save $10. But you got to admit, you walk up and down those streets and you're like, man, like forgetting about the millions and millions of dollars of businesses being transacted. You're like, there's an energy here, and that inspires my hustle. Meaning that if I was just sitting in some shack somewhere isolated in a forest, it wouldn't get there. So and some people would run scared of that. But I think what you're saying is you embrace that, and that's kind of where you.
Yeah, I would say it's the last place, definitely in New York City, where you can find that hustle 24/7, no holidays off. I mean, it happens to be now a lot of people there take off, which bothers me, but it's the one place where you can still go dressed in a suit, dressed in a T-shirt, but you know everyone you're talking to is trying to hustle just as much as you, if not more, and that's really what keeps me there. There are diamond districts in other parts of the world, but there's nothing like the one on 47th Street.
That's right. It's crazy. What was the pivotal moment when you realized you were in? You said you struggled, you try to get in, and then once you get in, you feel like you've made it. Obviously, you still have to keep hustling to build a business, but can you take us to the moment of where you said, I'm in, this is it, and I'm going to be able to make this a career? It's not going to be easy, but like, this is for me.
I would say, so when I first started, I was working full-time at a completely different industry, doing law school as well, and just trying to sell jewelry on the side. And really the moment I realized is when I was able to leave my full-time job. I'm like, this is taking away from my time spent selling jewelry. And even when I realized that I want to invest a lot more time on this than even studying for school. So it kind of just over time became way more of a priority to me. And that was because I had the support and of my client base, and I felt like they were relying on me to be that guy for them.
What is it like when you, I mean, this is not the easiest business to develop a client base. You're working full time. I assume that what you're saying, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is it wasn't about the numbers. Obviously, the numbers had to make sense for you to leave another job to take this on full time. But it was also like at a certain point, you felt the clients were coming in, you felt the energy was moving, and you were like, even if obviously, if you go from getting a full-time salary and your sales to dropping the full-time salary and just getting your sales, there's a period of time where you have to take a pay cut. But you have to take that leap to say, I'm here now, and I believe in what I'm doing enough to take that risk of a pay cut, for lack of a better term.
Right.
So how does that click for someone? That's a huge risk. That's a huge risk. Leaving a comfortable paycheck.
Yeah, definitely is. It's really that feeling of knowing that whether how big or small your client base is, they would actually be affected if you left the industry. If I told them, hey, I'm not doing jewelry anymore, I want to do finance or be a lawyer, they would have to go find another trustworthy. They would feel like there was a loss when it came to their needs in the industry. And it's really just knowing that people are actually relying on you. I don't want to let them down. And at the same time, I do want the freedom. And so it kind of just clicked at once where I knew these people believe in me, so I'm going to keep doing it. Whether it could be people really close to you that don't believe in you, but if you see people, strangers that do believe in you, that kind of gives you even more confidence because there's no real reason for them to. They can find someone else, but they want you to be the one for them. So that's what really kept me going and still does. I mean, but that's what kind of clicked in my head where I'm like, I'm the guy. They're telling me I'm the guy, so that makes me the guy.
I want to focus on trust for a few minutes because I think that there's something interesting about the jewelry business in general, which was my second point from before, but I just keep getting my ADD is kicking in, which is totally fine. How do you develop that trust? Because the jewelry business is interesting in that it is, people can see what they think is a quality stone. People can see what they think is a piece of quality jewelry or whatever it is. But in the end of the day, unless you're in the industry, which is a very small portion of people, and those are not the consumers, there's a huge amount of trust. People. I call myself a trusted advisor. People trust me with their information. People trust that I'm going to give them an insurance policy that covers what I say it's going to cover. But in the end of the day, it's in relatively plain English. If you're willing to sit down and read 100 pages, you can figure out what your insurance policy says. There's no way that I could figure out without being in the industry what's really on my wife's finger, for lack of a better term, right? What really is the quality of this piece? And so that comes down to trust. It's not just about who's standing there, which by the way, plays into the whole 47th Street thing, because how do you come off the street and make a huge purchase from somebody you don't trust? That's, I guess, the psychology it works because people are still doing it. It's pretty wild if you think about it. But how do you develop that trust? Where do you find that comes from?
So starting out, a big part of our client base were personal friends of mine who, that's really the basis. We know each other really well.
Yeah, but that's risky, right?
It's risky, but I would say if you go to the core of developing the trust, it's about how much investment you're going to put into the relationship as well, as opposed to just trying to make a quick sale, tell them whatever comes off the tip of your tongue and force them out. with me, with every client, I can be talking to somebody for days, weeks, months just to sell them or make a piece for them that's $350, like just like an engravable necklace or something. And I'll wait with them, talk to them. And it's never about the money. It's they know I'm doing this to build a brand and serve people and do fair business. And they realize that it's not always about being the cheapest, but that is a part of it where you realize certain things shouldn't actually cost that much, or if they want to know more information, you're willing to sit with them and teach them all about a specific diamond, teach them about how the gold is polished. You get all kinds of questions. And I think that's a big part of building the trust. And also a big part of it is just natural feeling when you meet somebody. For me, like I said, I was never really big into the schoolwork and sitting at a desk, but I definitely feel like I have a knack for being able to read somebody. And knowing that, I know that if you're going to trust somebody, if they're going to trust me, it kind of is just like a natural instinct. In the long run, it takes a lot to gain the trust, but there's also a natural feel when you meet someone. So,
is that something you can work on? Meaning, obviously, if a person is not trustworthy, they're not trustworthy. But I feel like that there is a certain talent or skill or work that people who are in the trusted business need to develop to express that without expressing it too much, where it's like, well, this guy, my father, he should rest in peace, always used to say, when the person says, if you meet a person for the first time and they say, you could trust me, when they say that the third time in the meeting, check your pockets and turn all the papers over on your desk. So obviously you can't, but I feel like there's something where a lot of people run scared from their pride in themselves and in what they're doing. They feel like they shouldn't say it the way they're saying it or be honest or say, I think that I'm the best. That's not an ego way, but it's, if you don't portray that confidence in what you're doing and in your longevity, right? Because if you're not trustworthy, you won't make it in the business, then people are less likely to trust you. So I feel like a lot of people run scared from that, from that personality trait, when you're saying what made you as successful as you are today is leaning into that.
You reminded me, one of my least favorite sayings is when someone says, if I'm being honest. It's one of those things where it's like the first time you're being honest is now, you know?
I have another one, with all due respect.
Yeah.
No,
or
you're
it's
about
like,
to curse me out. No, with all due respect.
Right.
That's a funny one.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. There are things you can do to build the trust. I think, like I kind of touched on, I think it's mostly about patience and showing that the sale isn't everything for you. If they have a question, you're answering it honestly. When it comes to quality certificates,
right, but what I'm saying is the
stuff
certificates, that paperwork is just paperwork. Right?
Right.
Anybody can produce a GIA certificate, and nobody has any idea what it actually says.
Right. So it's more.
Meaning, how many people call up the GIA and say, "By the way, I got this certificate from Aryeh, and I just wanted to make sure it's legit." Nobody does that.
People do, right. So people will go verify stuff. Not usually with me, but they'll sometimes find a better deal. So I will tell them, yeah, just go reference it with GIA. Maybe you got a good deal, you know. But for me, it's more about investing in the relationship. How much are you willing to do to actually build a relationship with the person, to get them to, for them to really feel like you're not just trying to make a quick buck off of them. And
we were
it's not even intentional. It's just, that's just how we are. So,
and I think the other thing is, we were talking about referrals before we went on air, and I think that, is there any greater validation to what you're doing or to your hustle?
Right. That's really it.
Right. I mean, that's automatic trust. If I'm willing to, for me to potentially impact myself or my family or my finances, that's one thing. I might take a flyer on you. But if I'm going to refer you to my friend or to somebody else and say you can trust this guy and buy from him, that's I think where we've reached that moment of trust where you're like, hey, if these people are willing to send me out to other people, then that means I'm doing something right, or my messaging is coming through.
Right. That's really what it, for me, that's what it is. I don't think I've ever had one person ask me, how can I trust you? Ever. It's
By the way,
always
those people are, I'm sure that they're going to find a way to say that they can't trust you, even if they can.
Yeah, but I've
You
never
didn't tell
even
me
dealt
about
with
the
that.
47 cents or something like that.
Yeah, it's never ever been about trust. Sometimes it's about price. We're just not always the cheapest, but the referral thing is definitely the main validation. And when people reach out to us, it's not even ever, thankfully, I'm not really a pushy salesperson by nature. So for me, when they're reaching out, I already know they want to buy from me. So it's not even the type of thing where I have to earn their trust. It's more about just guiding them through the process.
Proving them right.
Right. Proving them right and making them comfortable. And then they're even more satisfied because they're just like, this is what I expected. No surprises, nothing. So
this is indirectly related to hustle, but I was thinking about it. We were talking about, this is the point that we were touching on before, a different aspect of trust. My father used to say that one of the last industries left in the world where a handshake still means something is the jewelry business.
Yeah.
And I imagine that when you talk about the struggle to get into the industry and into the conversation and into that group, because I assume most of your sourcing is done from other people in the trade. I don't really, could be wrong, but I don't really see you hacking away at mines to get your own diamonds.
Right.
So how do you, and that's got to be a scary thing, because that means that if one person feels like that trust was broken on the handshake, it's over in the jewelry business. Anywhere else you can hide and go somewhere or say the guy was wrong, but you have a seasoned supplier or manufacturer that says that that you can't get in the business, or they won't do business with you. That obviously hurts you. But then I feel like the reverse is also true. If you're in, you're in. So I just, how do you feel about that trust that's left in that business? I mean, I have literally seen people give over tens of millions of dollars of jewelry and diamonds to another jeweler. And we're in the insurance business. We talk about consignment. We talk about signing memos, all that stuff. No, I know the guy. My father knew him for 30 years. Literally shakes the guy's hand, gives him $1 million piece of jewelry. I'm like, are you nuts?
I was about to say that, yeah. So for me, I experienced that firsthand. And like you asked me about building trust with customers, like you just said, most of the trust among vendors is that they're all generational businesses. I knew your grandfather. He once sold me a ring 50 years ago. And yeah, so now I can give you, you're his son, I can give you $1 million in inventory. I never had that. I barely ever had any family in the business, maybe like a great uncle, but nothing that ever helped myself in the business in terms of gaining trust. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I also have to go in there and prove myself to vendors that them trusting me is also a validation, in a way where I'm not really referencing or name dropping or anything like that. It's about, I have to do work behind the scenes to keep relationships going and build new relationships so that I can keep my business growing. It's while I'm building trust with my clients, I'm trying even twice as hard to do that with vendors and suppliers, just to fuel the business and keep a strong name and grow the brand. So it's definitely, I experienced it on both ends. Yeah.
It's amazing you say that, because I was thinking, if someone was listening to the beginning of this conversation, they would say, what's the hustle? Like, this guy he says he doesn't hustle the streets. He doesn't do this. How do he get into the business? How do he do it? How do you make it happen? And I think that is the nail you just hit on the head, is your hustle was different from a lot of other people, because I think the greatest testament to you, and I hope that we get to see, and I hope that the Keep Hustling podcast is still going in 20 years and we do another episode. Hopefully it won't be our second, it'll be our third, fourth, or fifth together, and we talk about the hustle. And we could talk about your next generation that comes in and they get to name drop you. And say, I mean, if you think about all those people, right?
Yeah.
All those people, I have a client who actually we had 2 clients, and one of them really wanted to do business with the other. And he said, I don't know, they're actually very close friends now, but I can't figure out how to get into the guy. And he figured out that somehow the guy helped one of his relatives get into America. And that was his end. He was like, listen, you helped my family. I feel like a debt of gratitude. You can trust me. You knew my uncle, my great uncle. It wasn't like his father or his grandfather or his brother and things like that. And it's just such a fascinating industry. And I never thought about, my angle was, isn't it awesome that it's still a business that people's handshake means something? Eventually,
right.
I'm sure that there are people that ruin that, but you know what I mean? But I never thought about the fact that it's got to be hard to get into that. Like, how many people
if you don't have someone to name drop?
That's what I'm saying. How many people said to you, who are you? Here's a $500
all
piece.
the time. Yeah.
You're not going to make money on that. You make $5 on that. until the guys won't say, here's a $50,000 piece that they'll work with you on. So
it's just as hard, if not harder, to gain the trust of someone who's used to just, oh, my dad is this guy. I know your dad, and then you're just a stranger off the street. Can you give me some inventory to sell? Do
you ever look back and like, why did that guy trust me? Or like, how did that happen? How did I get that first big, piece or whatever?
I do think a lot of it is, I could give myself credit, but I do think, like as in someone, when it comes to hustling, part of it is definitely spiritual, and you feel like sometimes you're just like, I don't even know how that happened. God did that, It was just, that's also a motivation. You're just like, how did that even happen?
I'm a man of faith, you know that.
Yeah.
But you gotta hit, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You also got to swing when the ball comes over the plate.
Right.
So it's great to say that. And yes, nothing would happen without God. I don't believe anything. I don't believe we would sitting here today without that. But you got to hit the ball.
Yeah.
You got to swing. So walking in, first time you're walking into a vendor, you're like, I assume you're like, there's no way this guy's going to say yes. But maybe you're better than me.
It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Like, how does that go?
And I'm not even, like I said, I'm not even salesy about it. So I show them the company. I'll sometimes here and there, I'll be like, look, this is what we sell. We make this. We're
But that's
real.
now.
But
that's now. Forget about that. I want to go back
day one,
5-6 years ago.
It was just kind of just being real with them. And I honestly, I don't have a set answer. I think it's partially personality, willing to invest, willing to, just keeping my word. I'll take it for a day, take a picture of it, give it back to you, whatever it is. Over time building it, but it's hard, honestly, to find an answer as to why this 60-year-old guy who's been in the industry for 40 years, who has been screwed over before plenty of times, doesn't want to have the appetite to take any risk right now. It's the market's hard, this or that. Why they would be willing to work with me to start, I honestly don't have a straight answer for that, but
that's part of their hustle. I think it's part of their hustle.
I think they're taking a risk on me, and they're just willing to do it. Yeah,
there is something
they need to still do it,
and there's something about people that get burned and get back up.
Right,
where they see this.
They know they have to still do it. Yeah,
but you're right. At a certain point in their career, they don't have to, yet they still do it. And I think that's part of keep hustling. Is like when it's in you, it's in you. Those guys that have been doing this for 30 or 40 years will never stop.
Right.
They're gonna hustle the waiter to buy a piece from them for his wife or girlfriend or fiance, because that's just what they do. Or they're gonna see a piece, someone wearing a piece. I've literally been in places where people have seen with jewelers, or they've seen something like, I want to buy that piece. I'm going to go over and talk to that person. I'm going to find out a way to meet them or whatever. Because you don't know what that watch is, but that's something I need.
You always need to be taking some level of risk in business every day. So it could be if someone else walked in trying to do what I'm doing, the guy would say no to him. It could be just I had a certain type of conversation with him that made him feel comfortable, or he believed in me. He saw that I'm working hard. A lot of times I'm going in there sweating, just like running around all day. They can tell I'm working with clients, trying to make moves, trying to do things. So that can be more inspiring to them, give them more confidence to be like, okay, he'll probably sell this now, or he'll come back. He seems like a diligent person on top of his stuff. So that's all part of it. But I think sometimes you can also just recognize it yourself. When I, God willing, look back, in 20 years from now, if I had some young hustler come into my shop, I do feel like I'd be able to tell, hopefully make the right choice and bet on that person. Get burned, but you do gain an instinct. You can tell when someone was like you, or someone, you can just sometimes read it on the person. So
100%. God, your story is so good, and I can't wait to see the rest of the next generation of how it develops, Avico, everything like that. Everyone should check out your socials, as I mentioned. Thank you again for coming in. We have a closing tradition on the podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite inspirational or motivational quote and what it means to them or how it inspires their hustle. So the floor is yours.
On the spot. I do post a lot of motivational content.
Everyone should follow, especially on, I think, Instagram.
Aryeh and Co. Big. My personal is Aryeh. I would say the dream is free, the hustle is sold separately.
I love that. Is that from someone else or that's yours?
I'm not even sure who said it, but I've seen it before.
We should look it up. I love it. This is, wow. The dream is free. The hustle
sold separately.
is sold separately. The dream is free. The hustle is sold separately. Love that. Wow. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
This was a lot of fun.
Great talk.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.